friends, it's Tammy. Thanks for joining me again today. I'm going to be making a fun alcohol ink and mixed media project. I'm using some graphics plastic paper, and this is a 12 by 12 piece. It comes in white and it also comes in clear. I like using the graphics paper because it seems to be more heat resistant. It's also less expensive than Yupo paper. I'm showing you here some netting that I purchased from Dollar Tree, and on this plastic paper, or the clear paper, excuse me, I use this gold from Color Joy alcohol ink and a foam dauber, and I placed the netting over top of it, and after I offloaded some of the pigment, I went ahead and stamped over those patterns, and it left a really cool pattern on my, my clear plastic paper. Now I took a sheet of the white graphics paper and I cut it in 4 sections, and I'm going to make just some very random patterns on my paper. I'm not thinking about it too much, but I'm just using my foam brush and I'm loading up colors on that tip edge of it. And I think on this I used some orange and some yellow colored, mustard yellow. And I just swiped down the page. Now I'm trying to offload a lot of that pigment off of my brush before I put the green on there, because it can make a kind of a yucky muddy color if you don't. And now I'm just swiping various colors of green that I loaded onto the brush. You can see that I got a little splatter of that green in my orange section, and I decided to go ahead and just splatter a little bit more and see what happens. I also took some cleanup solution and did the same thing, and it just lightened circles within those colors. All right, so I'm going to let that dry, and I'm just showing you here that you can use a ton of different things to create patterns in your inks. I've used this palette knife before and just kind of scraped it on my paper, and it's made some really cool patterns. Don't be afraid to leave some of that negative space on your paper as well, because it can really make a very effective and very pretty piece to have that negative space on there. But I'm not going to use negative space in this next piece that I'm doing here. I'm just taking various colors of my alcohol inks, and I'm just dripping them on in random areas. I'm not thinking about it. I'm just using colors that I think are more representative of fall. I'm using a couple of different purples, a few different greens, and I even add a little bit of like the mustard yellow, I believe. Now I'm trying not to add the colors too much directly over top. They will merge together on edges, and that's fine. That makes some unique colors. But I don't want to make mud here. That's not my goal. So I'm trying to focus more on the negative spaces that need color on them and filling those in. This is Rainbow by Marabou. It has some glitter in it, and it's gorgeous. And I was going to add some of that, but I don't know if I grabbed a new bottle or what, but I couldn't get it to come out. So I just didn't mess with it any further to tie up my video. But you might want to look into that. It gives a really pretty sheen with like a glittery effect. Now on this one, I've got a new brush and I'm just adding gold and orange, and I really am just stamping it on the page, turning my brush every now and again and creating just a really neat texture into my inks. And listen, you can take what I'm showing you here, but honestly, I just wasn't even thinking. I was just using the tools that I had out around me and just being loose and random, not thinking about it. Really, sometimes not thinking about it can give you the best results. You can even use some alcohol that I showed you there and spritz it on your design and add additional texture if you want to do that. But make sure that you're wearing your respirator mask when you do that. Excuse me. If you get alcohol on your hands, you want to make the alcohol inks on your hands, you want to make sure you try to get that off, because if your hands come in contact with other alcohol inks or alcohol in general, you're going to leave those traces. It's going to reactivate what's on your hands, and you might leave deposits of that color that you didn't intend to. So I just used some more of my cleanup solution on this, and just tapping it along. And then I went back in with some color in those areas that I used the cleanup solution in. And I just want to add a little bit of gold, and so I've got a very small foam dauber and put a little bit of the ink on my dauber, and I'm just stamping that on. So just a little bit of more of a close-up. All right, so I'm going to turn my paper upside down now. And I'm just going to use whatever I need to draw a shape that is representative of a pumpkin. Now, these are abstract, guys. You don't have to get them perfect. Just try to be loose. Keep it loose, not to think about it too much. I'm going to go ahead and cut that out. And now while I'm cutting this out, I'll let you know that preparing for my video, I went ahead and used some of my craft paper, and I used some matte medium and adhered it to a 4x4 by 1.5 wood substrate. And this one overhangs my substrate, so I'm just flipping it over, and I'm going to use an X-Acto and take my knife up against the side of my substrate and pull my X-Acto knife along that edge, and it makes a nice, clean, close cut. And I'm just going to cut my shape down a little bit because I want to leave some of the negative space on my canvas. Now I'm showing you here that sometimes I use that larger piece of the paper that I cut out from And I use that as my basis for my design. And then I put color or some other design under it. And I'll show you that later in the video. So I'm using my matte medium and I'm just buttering up the back side. And then I decided to bring in that clear graph paper that I did some of the gold stamping on earlier. And I'm buttering up the surface of my wood panel. And I'm going to add that clear. Now, I surely could have just done that same type of pattern on the white paper that's on my wood panel here. But this was already done, and I knew that I had the clear available. So I'm really just going to add this extra layer to my surface. So you can do it either way. All right, I used my matte medium, which will turn clear, and I've put that paper down. And now I'm going to add on top of the pumpkin shape. Now I'm using this other piece here to make the center for my pumpkin. And I liked those circles that we made from the alcohol ink drops. And I'm just going to lay that down in place. And now I'm just trying to find the patterns in the paper that we created. Just something that I like, areas in the paper that I really enjoyed looking at. And I'm cutting my shapes. So here I'm cutting a big leaf for my pumpkin. So when you do these types of papers, even if you don't like what you created, save it, hold on to it, because there will be some sort of an application that you will need that specific piece for at some point in time, and you will have it in your stash. It's a lot of fun to create these and just be so random about it, and then find that what you really disliked about it was the perfect piece for another art piece you were working on. So I just cut out my stem and I've laid that down and another leaf. Now I'm going to try this other paper, and I'm thinking that using some of the purple on this will be a really pretty addition to my oranges and yellows and greens. So I'm just going to fiddle with this a bit and decide where I want it and how I like it. And don't be afraid to let your pieces hang over the edge, because you can go back and do exactly what we did before and trim off the paper and make a very close edge. And I really like the aesthetic of having it run off of the edge of the paper. And here I'm just going to use my X-Acto knife and attempt to cut out more of a wavy pattern, thin curly cue that I can put on my pumpkin. I think I had a dull blade on my X-Acto knife because it just wasn't working well for me with the X-Acto knife today. So I have to go in with my scissors and trim up where my X-Acto knife wouldn't. Okay, it's the next day, and what I've done here is I pulled my camera in a little bit closer, and so you're going to get some shots that are a little bit out of frame, and I do apologize for that. But I will explain as I go if there's anything that I feel like is so close that you're not seeing. But everything is dry now, and I decided that I'm going to use some of this relief paint by Pebeo, and I'm just going to put in some veins and some texture and just make some definition more on my pumpkins. Before I did that and off screen, I used this Kamar varnish on my alcohol ink painting once it was dry. I went in 3 or 4 times and did 3 or 4 layers, letting them dry in between. Also, I used the UV protection from Krylon as well, and it's a UV archival spray, and that kind of helps your alcohol inks from fading over time. Alcohol inks have a tendency to fade out fairly quickly, so you really do need to protect them. When using your relief medium, you want to practice with it a little bit. It comes out pretty easily, but it helps to have a little bit of a practice run before you put it on your final piece. But it's a super forgiving medium and a lot of fun to work with when adding detail. Okay, and so now I'm actually using some nail tape, and I got this off of Amazon, and it's essentially what is used in nail salons for nail design. It's inexpensive, and you can get a lot of colors and patterns with it. It's very thin and flexible. I'm just going to take my silicone brush here and go along and make sure that it's making good contact on my substrate, and trying not to make contact with my fingerprints on my substrate because I will be resining over it. I don't want to risk there being fish eyes with my resin. And I'm just trimming those ends as close as I can. It's really kind of hard to see in the light, but it gives a little bit of a shimmer. Sometimes the way I turn it, you'll see a little bit of shimmer. And it's super cute. Guys, use what you have. I mean, it's really just a use what you have kind of thing. And make it work. Okay, so here I'm going to, I taped off my boards off camera. And I'm going to go on ahead and get ready for resining. And I'm going to be using my nitrile gloves. You really want to wear nitrile when working with resin. It's very important. And I'm going to be using my respirator mask. I have filters on my mask that are for organic vapors and gas. And that's very important. When I'm not wearing it, I keep it in that plastic bag and out of the room to protect it from any, from picking up anything else while it's not in use. Today I'm going to be using my Total Boat. And here I'm starting to get a little bit closer in perspective here. And I do apologize for that, but I was trying to get in so that you could see the detail work that I was doing. All right, so I'm just using Total Boat, and this is a 1-to-1 epoxy. I love this epoxy. It does great work. And I'm using 1 ounce of Part A, 1 ounce of Part B. Now is a good time, if you need to go ahead and fast forward through this section if you are very familiar in working with resin, because I just want to go through the process for any new viewers who are not used to seeing this done. All right, so I've poured my Part B now, and I'm adding that to my mixture. And I have a timer, and I'm setting that for 3.5 minutes. And it doesn't look like I'm stirring very slowly here, but I am very much stirring as slowly as is possible for me. This video is sped up, so it looks like I'm whipping it, but please don't whip it. You're going to incorporate micro bubbles into your resin. So you want to make sure that you are scraping the bottom of your cup, making sure that any resin or hardener that's adhered to the bottom of your cup is lifted and combined into the mixture. And you also want to scrape the sides of your cup to do the same thing. As well as your stir stick, you want to occasionally pull that out, wipe it up against the sides, and then swipe it and incorporate it back into your resin. And you do all of this within a 3-minute span. So here we go. We're going to essentially just pour this right on top. So I'm showing here that getting right up to that edge is pretty important. You want to make sure your resin is right up on that edge. And I try to make it sit on that edge to the point where it won't go over the edge, but it will fill in all the way around. Now, if some of your resin does flow over the side, it's okay, but I do try to capture that with my finger or a cloth on the sides, because resin's going to go where resin already is. Because it is self-leveling, it wants to follow where resin is already. And so if you've got resin on your sides, then what's going to happen is more resin's going to follow it, and you're going to wind up with some of the resin flowing off of your substrate. So I just took my heat gun, or my my little kitchen torch, and I did a really quick swipe over that to get rid of bubbles. All right, and so here is the way I do it now. This is more or less how I used to do it. I usually pour a dollop of my resin in the center and then move it towards the edges. Okay. Everybody develops their own style. This is just what works for me. There's no right or wrong. However, you know, whatever works for you. All right, now I'm taking some of my resin and I'm going around the edges. I have just a little bit on my stir stick and I'm going all the way around those edges. And this kind of really helps make sure that all of your edges are covered, and it gives it a more of a domed look in the end. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. I had a lot of fun making it for you. Check your resin pieces every 15 minutes for the first hour. Here's a look at our finished pieces.